All right, so my name is Jon Kruse, and I'm going to present today on growing seed for on-farm use. I farm in Elmwood County, Iowa, near Harpers Ferry. On my farm, I grow corn, soybeans, rye, and wheat. A little bit about me. My wife, Chelsea, and I live in Madison, Wisconsin, where she is a surgical resident at the University of Wisconsin Hospital. We enjoy hiking, swimming, snow skiing, and also going out to restaurants in and around the Madison area. This is a picture of Chelsea and I on Madeline Island on Lake Superior, taken this summer. I work off the farm as an independent crop adjuster. The reason why I took this job is it's flexible and it works with my farming operation. I've been adjusting for 10 years and recently started working in Wisconsin. I've traveled to different states like Missouri, Indiana, South Carolina, Texas, and Minnesota recently. I've worked with citrus, cotton, and sugar beets, and here's a picture of me holding a sugar beet earlier this month in central Minnesota. Oops, excuse me. Reasons why I enjoy Northeast Iowa. I enjoy mushroom hunting, and this is a picture of a pizza that I made with a puffball crust and a couple different kinds of oyster mushrooms. I also enjoy being on the Mississippi River. This is my sister holding up a bluegill. And then off to the right is a picture of my nephew and I sitting on my jet ski. He wouldn't let me take him for a ride, but I got a picture with him. Okay, and so being on the Mississippi River and enjoying that natural resource, that's one of the reasons why I got into cover crops. I started getting interested in 2017. I learned about PFI from a friend, Kayla Cater. And so my first field day was actually a bus trip out to Dave Brandt's farm with PFI. And we learned about the long-term benefits from cover crops, water infiltration, reduced fertilizer and chemicals. So every year since then, it's been my goal to try something new on my farm. Why did I get into seed production? I started using cover crop seed sourced from local commercial sellers. Decided I would like to try and grow my own seed for the purpose of a longer rotation in certain fields. I also wanted to determine if there was a cost savings for producing my own seed. Cost share helps the economics of cover crops in general, and growing my own seed helped improve my bottom line on covers. My experiences in growing seed, wheat seed grown in 2019, that was broadcasted. Rye seed in 2021, and that was drilled. I switched to rye because it is more winter hardy. Seed selection, I use VNS seed, bought from a local farmer for $8.75 a bushel. The drill I used was a John Deere 12-foot drill with single disc openers, 7.5-inch spacings. I had decent seed to soil contact, but in places I had seed on top of the ground. So next year, if I run into this problem, I could come back with a cultimulcher or some kind of a roller to get better seed to soil contact. And the rate I used was 130 pounds to the acre. Field selection and seed bed prep. I selected 2 fields along woods that were not the most efficient and have heavy deer pressure. I used a John Deere field cultivator, model 980, a few days prior to seeding. Okay, so this is my fall fertilizer on the top part. Use the same rate as corn because I did not push for the local elevator to change the rates, and the fields were 4 and 3.5 acres. So here are some of my prices, and these prices are not irrelevant anymore. I also, in the springtime, I applied 125 pounds of urea, and that was when the rye was about 6 to 8 inches tall. Down at the bottom, I have estimated cost per bushel is around $2.70. That doesn't include any rent or my time. And the local retailers this fall wanted $16 a bushel. So you got to take that in consideration. I don't take any income off of my farm. I leave everything on the farm. Okay, this is a picture from springtime. At the top of the picture is my rye field drilled. And at the bottom of the field is what was in wheat in 2019. I didn't use any herbicides on my cover crops. I didn't have any weeds to speak of. One of the reasons why I thought I didn't have any weeds, weed pressure, is the seeding rate, and then also I had a wind event come through that laid my cover crop, or excuse me, my rye completely flat. So that could have created a mat and shaded out weeds. But in 2019, with the wheat, that was broadcasted, and it was a little lighter stand, and I had some weed pressure in this field, and I actually had to mow off a section of the field, was not able to harvest it. We had a giant ragweed problem. Let's see. And this is also the wheat field. I had streaks, like where there was no wheat, and I've got mare's tail coming through still this spring. I don't have any trouble killing this, terminating this mare's tail with my herbicides, but there is some additional weed pressure here. Okay, so harvest method and combine settings. I use a Case IH 2188 with a specialty rotor. I started with the factory settings found in my owner's manual. And as we started harvesting the first little bit, we'd harvest and then kind of take a look and evaluate the grain tank, also behind the combine to see if we're losing any seed out the back. We noticed we had a lot of chafer and straw in the grain tank, so I upped the fan speed by 50 RPMs. Also, looking back, I wish I would have closed down the top sieve for better cleaning there as well. I am broadcasting my seed back out onto my fields, and so I'm not too worried about the foreign material in my sample, in my cover crop. But next year I am considering cleaning my own seed. Down here is just some examples from my operator's manual. It says wheat down here, but we use the same settings. So on my combine I have a rotor, and we set the RPMs to 850. The gear range is at the high side, and then also the concave, you can adjust and use the number 2 setting. The chafer settings is the top sieve. We set at the front part at a 1/2 inch gap, and then the rear is also 5/8. And this is the one I think I should have adjusted, closed down a little bit to get more cleaning on the top sieve, and allowed some of that chafer or straw to go out the back. Also, the shoe setting is the bottom sieve, and that is set at 1/4 inch. Fan speed is factory is 1,050, and I upped that. I also have the grate type is slotted on my combine. That's behind the concave, and it's recommended to use this style of grate for cover crops, but there are other options too, but this is more the standard option, I think. But I'm missing some bars that should also go on those grates, and I don't have any pictures, but that would help also with moving the straw and the chafer out the back of the machine. So it was kind of falling down on my sieve. So that's something else I could have adjusted. Also, I'm not concerned about the straw. I just let it go out the back and just leave it on the ground. In my combine book, it described the straw quality as mangled, and so it gave you recommendations on how to correct this, and one of the recommendations was to slow the rotor down. Since I wasn't worried, I didn't do that, but I feel like I could have slowed the rotor down, but with slowing my rotor down, I could also run into the issue of not actually getting proper thrashing, so actually removing the seed from the heads. All right. Here's a video I didn't intend to put in, but just of me combining. You can see it's kind of hanging up a little bit on the one side. It's not very clear. And here is just some more pictures of the harvested field. And you can see up here that, I was leaving some streaks. With the crop being down, sometimes I had trouble cutting it with the sickle bar. So yeah, it wasn't perfect, but I was happy with the results that I got. Okay, so the next few slides I'm going to talk about are head settings. The first thing I want to point out, in my operator's manual, they talk about this feeder house safety lock. Anytime I'm working with my head, I always put this down over on the cylinder so that there's no chance of the head falling down on me unexpectedly, because it can hurt you severely or kill you. So I encourage everyone, if they're working with their own combine, look at your own owner's manual for safety precautions and follow them to the T, because it's not worth it trying to save time by compromising yourself. All right, so these are just some pictures of my head out of my operator's manual. I used a Case IH 15-foot 1020 flex head. So I made my head rigid, and it shows underneath these runners, and then also you want to add in these lockout straps with some bolts, and you want to make sure that this lockout strap is tightly secure against the angle irons, so this way your head isn't bouncing across the field when you're harvesting and you get uneven cutting heights. Also, on my combine, on the left-hand side, there's a support chain right here, and it encouraged you to use an eye bolt and a clevis, but I didn't. I just adjusted the chain so it was tight. And here's just some pictures that I took, kind of just a different variety. So right here is where that lockout strap would go. You want to use these upper bolts holes right here. Okay, so in the future is something I kind of thought about after we got done harvesting, is if the crop is flat again like it was, I could use the automatic header height control on my combine, and this would prevent my head from having to ride on the ground. So, I have to manually adjust the height of my head the way I combine this year, and it would be nice to use the automatic header height control. This way you're not digging into the ground too much with your head, and it's just a little easier on your equipment. And then also I would not make it rigid. I would leave it flex. But so with saying that, this head, I would have to upgrade the potentiometer for the head to work with the combine. And I think that was around a $600 investment. But I think in the future, if I was going to expand acres, I think that this would be worth it, because otherwise I have to constantly sit there and adjust the head height. Okay, seed storage and germ test. Currently right now with the small amount of acres I'm doing, I just store it in a gravity wagon. I tested 184 total seeds for the germ test, and had 162 that grew within 6 days, and that's 88% germination rate. Why the random number? That's because what my container would hold, and it kept it organized for me. The other reason why I think maybe I had a good success or germ rate is I upped the fan speed in the combine, and I think I blew out some of the lighter seed that maybe wouldn't have grew. The NRCS requires an official germination test. I send mine to the ISU Seed Lab. This is required for cover crop cost share. I haven't got my numbers back yet for this year. And also, I sent my sample in for the wheat when I grew that. Here is just a picture of my cover crop seed, or my rye seed, after harvest, and I've moved it into my fertilizer spreader, but I also use it for broadcasting cover crop seed. And so you can definitely see that there's some straw and there's some heads in there as well. I'm not worried about it plugging up in this type of practice, but if I was going to go to drilling or something, I would definitely want it cleaned. And I also broadcast at about 60 to 62 pounds to the acre. I don't give myself the full credit for my germ test, my home germ test. I give myself a little padding, and then also, since I'm broadcasting over corn stalks mainly, I also leave a little bit of room for error there too. Okay, so I'm in the earlier stages of seed production. Every year I hope I can improve on something, or, have an afterthought that maybe I can prepare myself for in the future. Yeah, I see promising results, and this year I grew over 50 bushels to the acre, which when I had the wheat broadcasted, I was around 43 bushels per acre. So I hope in the future I can keep improving my yields, and then also maybe get on a better fertilizer plan too, as well, to help with cost savings. Why I want to continue, the main reasons are wind erosion. This spring, this was me planting corn, no-tilling into cover crop, and I had a friend send me a video of him field finishing, and he could not see the front of his tractor. It was so windy out there, and when I would look around out 3-4 miles from my farm, you could just see the amount of dust in the sky. So I was pretty pleased with myself that I had minimal dust as I was planting. And also another big thing is water erosion. It seems to be pretty common for us to get 5 inches of water in a morning up in northeast Iowa. And so it's really hard to control that water. So with cover crops, I feel like I'm doing a much better job. And also just to promote soil health, it's amazing amount of earthworm activity that we are seeing with no-till and using cover crops. So I'm really excited to see in the future how much it will progress. Also, I really want to protect Northeast Iowa's natural resources. The Mississippi River is pretty important to me. I've got a lot of great memories of being on the river, so I'd really like to take care of it. All right, and thank you.
All right, guys. Hopefully everybody can hear me well. Let's see, this is where my farm is at here in Greene County. That's kind of west central Iowa. In this picture here, this is my cover crop seeding equipment. And we have a Montag dry cart here behind a Salford vertical till machine. And then that's just what a picture of the spring crop looks like there up top. So, all right, so a little history on me. I am not from Iowa. I'm originally from Nebraska. I moved here in 2012. We moved our entire farm from that state to this state. We did that because of taxes, water rights, a bunch of reasons. So I am pretty impressed with the soil. So that's one thing where cover crops, it's more important here probably than it was in Nebraska, just because the soil there is poor and people don't think about it as highly as they do here. So my history with cover crops there is we started raising rye in 2013, actually still in the state of Nebraska for seed. And we did that because I really was concerned that if I could get a good germination right here in Iowa because of the higher rainfall amounts. we didn't originally use rye to, help my soil. It was I was raising it specifically for seed to start with. So I didn't start for soil health reasons, but I am working on that road now as we get into this. So I'd really like to have a 3-crop rotation on my farm. And so that's rye is one way I want to get there. I'm also using a rye and buckwheat as my second crop behind rye. I'm trying to make it more feasible to raise just, small grain. So having a second crop helps with that compared to corn and beans. I'm transitioning some acres to organics. So having rye and buckwheat and not using chemicals or even commercial fertilizers in that rotation is possible. And then as you get into organics and how you certify, and maybe people know this already, but it's 3 years, so many months, and 3 crops. So if you use 2 crops in 1 year, that can save you some time as transitioning to organic. So that's why I like to double crop what I'm doing here. So, and then we also have a tiling business. So we tile for people in the fall. So having rye gives me a time to do my own fields in the summer. So there is so I my slides are all set up like from beginning to end. Like, here's the beginning of starting our rye process. I like this machine because it just spreads it evenly across the field. There really aren't rows here, as you can see, so that really helps with weed pressure. Here's my seeding window, September 15th to October 15th. Seeding rate was that. I've gone much higher than that this year, more like 130, 160, just to keep weed pressure down, and I think it's gonna help with my germination. So we'll go into that here. Here's kind of the spring green up. I use 30 to 50 pounds of nitrogen with a 10-to-1 ratio to sulfur. And that is it for fertilizer. I don't use anything else, and no chemicals as well. So, wanted to show this picture here because you can look in the canopy here. There is really no weeds coming. Here's what it looks like. This is actually on a field that was derecho corn last year, and it was just disced under from the previous owner that had the field. So as you can see, no volunteer corn as of yet. Here is, I hire all of my harvesting done. I don't do any of it myself because I have the tiling business that I got to worry about. And so in fall time, I can do that, and I don't have to worry about the harvesting getting done. I also want to show this because, again, no weed pressure really at all. There's maybe a couple down there at the bottom. And then we are taking the straw off, baling it. So added income there for the straw. On this field specifically, it was 2.5 ton. I've been getting anywhere from 2 to 3 ton is kind of what I've been getting over the last couple of years on straw. So now that we've taken the harvest off of the rye, we've come and we've planted buckwheat. And this is kind of about 3 days or so. Well, excuse me, this is the 3-day picture after it's been planted. This is a few more days, and then 10 days after it is up, you get flowers. So from emergence, it's 3 days, and then another 10 days, you've got flowering. So, and I planted on July 24th, which was, you saw my other slide, it was July 6th was the harvest date. The reason for that was we put hog manure on this field behind it, and then we had to do some we were busy tiling on another field and didn't get planted right when I wanted to. So I could have given myself probably an extra 15 days here, of getting it planted a little earlier. Here is buckwheat getting more mature. As you can see on me, it was roughly above the knee there. And then it flowers clear till this picture is after it froze. So it will flower and stay green for a very long time, and then it didn't mature until we got our killing frost. Here is picking the buckwheat. As you can see, back to my volunteer corn from the derecho. Thanks a lot. So the yield was 1,500 pounds, and I am selling this directly to another seed company at Iowa Cover Crops. I don't know, Bill, if you're in here, or James, you're in here. But anyway, so they're buying that from me, and so I don't have to deal with 4 or 5 semi-loads of buckwheat. I just deliver it right away after harvest. So here is some numbers that we can run through. So my rye seed cost is that, and so I figured in the seeding cost with my vertical till machine. The one thing with that is that machine is very, very fast. I'm planting 40 acres an hour with that thing, so I don't have to, I can cover a lot of acres, do several hundred acres, in a day. And that box in the back, the fertilizer cart, holds the entire field's worth of seed, and I gotta fill one time. So, for me, the speed of getting the process done is definitely what I'm looking for, Fungicide is what, if you're going to raise this for seed, you should use fungicide. Weather conditions dictated this year, or last year, that I did not have to use it. So I skipped it, so trying to reduce chemical usage and all that, so. My nitrogen price, that is laughable right now, but that's what it was at the time. That's with sulfur as well. So I used very few pounds. Harvesting costs, that's what I'm paying the guy. Tillage passes, there you go, there's your total. Yeah, okay, and then here's your revenue side. This is my 2-year running average on roughly about 200 acres per year of rye. I'm averaging about 70 bushel. And this is the average on the straw. For this year, this is my first year raising buckwheat. That is what I got for an average on 160 acres of buckwheat. And there's my total, and there's the cost per acre compared to the revenue. So as you can see, even on years like this, when corn and beans are extremely high priced, it's very competitive. In fact, more competitive. So now, I have a little scientific project that I did, I don't know what you want to call this, but this is my little relay crop. And here's some pictures at the end of the year here, but we'll get started into it. I planted rye with my vertical till machine. And in the previous fall, obviously September 15th, roughly, let's call it. And I put it on a field that was irrigated. And the reason I did that is because we were coming out of a drought where we probably had 4 inches for the year in 2020 on that specific farm. So I was really concerned with any subsoil moisture at all, if I'd have any at all. And so I put my little test of 80 acres of this deal on that farm. So I came into that standing rye on April 21st, planted soybeans, planted 130,000 plants an acre of soybeans, and I didn't use any chemicals, anything, just straight into the rye. Waited until July 6th, picked the rye off for seed, and underneath you can see my rows of beans coming there. Pretty small, some got chopped off a little bit with the bean head. All I did was we put the head at a certain height and kept it there above the beans because they did stay shorter because the rye did kind of suppress them. So that's what that looked like there. Here's kind of another picture you can see right there. The top of the bean got chopped off a little bit by the bean head, but plenty of leaves underneath to capture sunlight yet. So here is what, on this field specifically, the rye made 10 bushels less. The soybeans did make 40 bushel in the end of the year here. So that turned out pretty well. And here's what I did for numbers on that. And I'd have to be 92 bushel beans to make the same total revenue. Now, in this situation, I used 1 pass of Roundup after I harvested the rye to get any grass that was coming on these beans. And that was the only chemicals that I used. And so chemical-wise, a much cheaper program than normal. And yeah, that's 40 bushel beans instead of 80 bushel beans like you could have had, but I got the rye revenue off there. And the one thing I like about this is I have that living, growing root in the soil the entire year, from the previous fall till, I picked the beans, and we still have some volunteer rye coming after the beans, even after that, so. Okay, so going on to selling seed for rye, for cover crop seed. Need to get a seed license from Idols. That process is pretty simple, and I think if James is in here, he can explain that probably better than I can. Currently, I do not sell under a specific name. I sell under Iowa cover crops because I raise too many bushels to sell myself. I have to move a big volume of bushels. So I'm selling a small portion of what I raise by myself under my own name, but right now I'm using Iowa cover crops to sell a large majority of what I raise. And the buckwheat completely was to Iowa cover crops. I didn't sell any of that myself. They had a market for that to begin with. So I guess you could consider me a contract grower at some point, somewhat, but I'm also on my own a little bit selling. So I pay the cleaning facility to clean and bag the rye. We get the seed tested from the university. You got to test for your noxious weeds and your germ. We raise open pollinated rye that is not a protected variety. You cannot raise hybrid rye and sell it as seed. Don't try it. I had not, but don't try it. Make sure the germ is above 85. That's what we like to have. So that was my biggest concern doing rye in Iowa, was can we keep that germination high enough? I think, here, we'll go with a couple videos here quick. There's some bags in the warehouse that have been cleaned and bagged already. And there is a fanning mill cleaning the grain. There's some holding tanks there. And then there's a gravity table. Anyway, so what I was going to say about the rye, to get your germination. We've done very well getting high germination in Iowa for the last couple years. Part of the reason I think that's possible is because of the weather we've had the last couple of years. It's been a little drier than normal in the spring. That's helped. But we're putting a high amount of seed out there, and I'm spreading it evenly across the field, so there's not really rows. So the seeds themselves do not tiller as much as normal. And I think when you get the tiller on the plant, that tiller of the plant raising the seed is causing that lower germination. So if you can have more single stock plants or less tillers, I think that's where you can raise a little bit of your germination. And then just getting lucky with weather was part of it too. So, all right, so main reasons I'm raising cover crop seed, and I've kind of touched a little bit on this as well, is I want 3 crop rotation. Corn, soybeans, rye, that really works well with a second crop behind it. As you can see, I'm testing 2 things there. I've relay intercropped and I've double cropped. Which one was better? As of this year, the double crop was, having the buckwheat behind the rye. That was a better revenue. I want to transition more farms to organics, so that's why I'm doing some of these, double crop things and not using chemicals. That was one of the main reasons for using rye. Is in wheat, I've raised wheat before too, and I get weed pressure in wheat. In rye, I just don't. It stays away somehow. It works so much better. Increased soil health, and then, once again, I run a tile business, so I need to tile my own farm someday, and I can't do everybody else's when I'm doing my own. So do that in the summer when I've got a little bit of time between crops. Okay, so in conclusion, kind of the same things I touched on here. Cover crops are a good tool for us. Everyone here in this room I know is concerned about soil health, and I am too. And I, didn't start for that reason, but I'm there now. And, having a third crop that actually pays is the only way I really think that cover crops are really going to work to really improve your soil. Because sure, we can plant them in the fall and then we can spray them in the spring and plant our corn, but did that really give you that much root mass to fix anything in your field? And I want the result. I don't care how I get there. And I'm using a 3 crop rotation to get the result, because to get your soil loosened up and to reduce nitrogen. And that's one thing I didn't touch on here is I didn't figure the opportunity cost to, I'm raising that double crop, but the value of that was $300 an acre is what that buckwheat was, right? Well, how much nitrogen can I produce off of a cover crop behind my rye for this year's crop, right, for corn? Well, with higher input costs, now that's a big question I need to ask myself. Is it worth it to raise the double crop and make the $300-400 revenue, or can I make $200 worth of revenue of nitrogen off of that cover crop? So that's one thing. As an opportunity cost, I need to figure into my numbers that I wasn't figuring before. So, but fertilizer was cheaper last year, so I don't have to think about that. Let's see. Yeah, profitability. That's the name of the game here. Is rye is extremely cheap to raise, and with prices, corn's gone up, so has the price of rye. We all see that buying the seed. Now it's even more valuable, to raise that for seed. So that's, and then, shipping is more expensive. So we're raising rye in North Dakota and shipping it to Iowa to plant it, right? That's where a lot of it comes from. Well, shipping costs are double and triple now. So how much more is the seed going to cost on top of that? And then government policy pushing us to use this stuff. So, if you're thinking about, raising cover crop seed, guess what? The government is helping us to get a business started, let's say, and to move it in that direction. And I always say that don't work against them, try to work with them, or and I just think that it's an opportunity. Don't look at it as a negative because the government's in this and they want to push us towards cover crops. Think of it as opportunity. So I think that's what everybody could do. And thank you for listening to what I got to say.
Great.
Let me put this down.
Okay, now we're gonna do questions. John, you wanna come up? Okay, who's got the first question about growing your own seed? Becca.
I was wondering for both of you, how does the rye fit in your rotation? Is it?
I'll go. Yeah, so okay, she asked where I put rye in my rotation. I do corn, soybeans, and then rye. I've done rye behind corn, and I usually get a 10 to 15 bushel yield hit because of that, because they're both a grass crop.
Yeah, so,
Just use this one. This one works.
okay.
Just pass it back and forth.
So yeah, my rye was following soybeans. I didn't want to have to wait for my corn to come off, and then also to do more tillage, I guess. If it's more disking, chisel plowing to make up a seed bed. I just went in with the field cultivator, so it was easy, and I also seeded my rye around October 6th. So I feel like it would be November before I could ever get out there for my time to do following corn. So.
Question for Joel. Can you speak to what's your management practices in the rest of your rotation in the corn and soybean side as far as maybe tillage and cover cropping there?
So when so from the corn crop going to beans, I strip till. That's how I do my tillage practices there. From like rye going back to corn, in the past I've done a cover crop to produce nitrogen. I've done the double crop, but then, in the spring, the double crop, you've got to do something to, freshen up the field, whatever. I do usually just a cultivation pass and plant corn. But I don't use anhydrous. I use all liquid fertilizer with my planter and Y drops. So I don't have to, put anhydrous down in the fall or anything like that. And so that's kind of somewhat what I do for a fertilizer program. Did you have any other question beyond that, what you thought I needed to answer?
Curious on, do you cover crop ahead of corn and soybeans?
So yes, I do somewhat ahead of beans. Oh, sorry. He asked if I cover crop in front of the other crops. And I do, not as heavily, because I'm trying to make it a 3-crop rotation and do it in that 3rd crop year is what I'm really trying to focus on. So that way I don't have as many issues. I planted, I should have put some pictures on here of that. This year was my first year of I had rye this high. I planted corn into it. Worked out great, but compared to that farm to another farm, I probably had a 20 bushel yield hit. So, I want to do it, but for me, I'm finding that I don't have to worry about a yield hit necessarily if I'm putting that cover crop in that 3rd rotation. It's helping, I'm getting more benefit out of it too, right? I got to spray that rye. I let it grow for, a month, but now I get to let it grow for 3 months, or whatever. So it's just about root growth and the length of time you get to, use that cover crop, so. You got anything else on that, John?
Yeah, so I mainly want to use my rye seed on top of corn stalks and then no-till soybeans in the spring as early as I can. I mean, April, if the weather will allow that. There is a big risk with weather of trying to terminate that cover crop. So, this year it was cold and it's, will my chemicals work, or will I have to come out and spray it twice, or is it going to rain for 10 days? And will my cover crop be too large or too tall? We had our cover crop was actually the heads were actually hitting our sprayer booms on our 3-point sprayer, and we were really nervous, but we actually got a good termination on that in June. So.
Where did the buckwheat idea come from?
That came from Iowa Cover Crop said, hey, I got a market for buckwheat. You want to try and raise it? That was the question I got asked me. And I said, why not? I'll try it behind the rye and see what happens. So I did research, and Iowa State has a little bit of research on this, about 1-page research. And it's, we raised this in 1800s, and there was 2 million acres in 1800 or whatever, but now there's 0. And, I don't know, maybe, James, you have a little more idea on how many acres there are in Iowa as of now, but not very many, doesn't sound like.
320.
320? And I know 160 of it. Okay, so maybe you're the largest buckwheat grower in Iowa, I don't know. But, so yeah, that's how it came about. I had a market, an opportunity, and I tried it. That was it.
Right here.
So my question is back to the buckwheat. I'm not familiar with it at all, never done any research on it. Other than raising it for grain and root growth underneath, what are the other advantages?
It is very good for disease control. That's one thing it's very good for. Because it's not technically a brassica, and it's not technically a broadleaf, right? Am I right by that? I'm not much of a scientist here, but it's like falls into the category of all its own, kind of almost on plants. And so raising that gives you a break between plant cycles, between a grass or a broadleaf.
Nitrogen fixation or no?
None. There's none that I know of. It doesn't fixate any. Go ahead.
How did you plant?
Oh, sorry. I use that same vertical till machine, and then I rolled it when I got done. So, and that's one thing I'm changing to now. I haven't been rolling it for rye or this, and I'm going to, because it just did a better job.
Right here.
Any cost savings to tiling in the summer, or is it strictly a timing?
Oh, well, since I run the business, yes, I would give a discount for yes. But for myself, sometimes it depends. Sometimes there are cheaper tile prices in the summer. You have to buy a certain amount of volume, but yes, there's cheaper prices then.
Do either one of you have, on your organic matter, have you tested it, or did you gain any, or what's happening there?
That is a hard one to answer, because honestly, I've only been down the cover crop avenue in Iowa specifically for a certain number of years here, since I just moved to Iowa not that long ago. When I first moved, I wasn't doing any, of these practices like this. I decided I'm going to move in here and do what everybody else is doing, and disc grip and anhydrous and, get after it. Well, after being here for 3 or 4 years, I figured I could do other things and do it a better way. And so, no, I don't have great numbers that say, hey, my organic matter has risen this much in 5 years, but I can see in my own fields there's a difference.
What are your numbers now?
We are running 3.5 to 4.5, 5% organic matter is where we are. Depends on which field. And I should say, we're in the Des Moines loam soils. I'm 45 minutes, northwest of here.
So I haven't actually tested organic matter because of using cover crops, if there's any improvement, but our soils range from 2.5 to 3.5%. In Northeast Iowa. I'm hoping, maybe in 5 or 10 more years, I can see some evidence that cover crops are increasing my soil organic matter, but as of right now, I'm not actively testing for it.
Other questions?
Why have you not chosen to crop annual rye
Annual rye, as in, so you're not going to plant in the fall, you're going to plant that when? Would that be spring planted? James, do you know the answer to that? I don't know. What's the difference, to be honest with you? I mean, it's both a rye crop, but one's more of a grass than a seeded crop, a headed crop. You know what I mean? Right?
Annual rye
Yeah.
would be winter kill, or just wondering why.
Yeah.
Oh, why aren't you using annual ryegrass?
Yeah, why? Because nobody's planting that for cover crop seed really in the area. Plus, it's a harder one to kill, so that's why people aren't planting it for cover crops. That's my simple answer.
Federal crop question. If you relay crop, you can't federal crop, can you? Both of you should be able to answer that.
I can answer that. I didn't insure the field. You're right.
So, but he couldn't?
You know, they change policies every year, but as far as I know, you cannot get insurance on that.
I don't carry insurance on rye. You can take hail insurance, but other than that, you can't even take insurance on rye. It's not an insurable crop in Iowa as of yet, right, James?
So specifically, you didn't insure the rye, but then also on your relay beans, you didn't insure those beans at all? Correct. Yeah, okay.
That's correct.
We've got one over here.
Well, Lydia's there first, and then Kayla.
Okay. I had a question on the straw in the picture there. Are you baling that, or is that going back on the field?
Yeah, there was a previous picture it was square baled and it went to a dairy. So that's what I did with it.
Is volunteer buckwheat hard to kill?
I hope not, because I'm going to find out next spring. That was one thing with the buckwheat, and James and I had this conversation because I'm trying to raise it for him. You know, the rumor was, or the thought hat was when it freezes, it's going to drop some of its seed. There was seed on the ground when I picked it. I don't know if it came from frost or just from the amount of time it sat in the field. So there was some head loss there, but there's not really a head to the plant. As you can see, those flowers, they all turn into a seed, that little bud of a flower there. And so it's open to the air and open to the environment, your seed is, once it's mature. So it can be, you get a hailstorm, you're done. Or, same with rye, it'd be the same case. But I think even hard winds could be an issue, I don't know. It's my first shot.
A couple questions on the annual rye. A couple years ago when I did that wide row study with the Practical Farmers guys, some of the guys used annual rye because we were planting it at like V2 to V5, and the annual rye gave better growth and tolerance to the shade than the cereal rye would. That's about the only thing I know about annual rye, but just a comment on that anyway for interseeding early.
Any other questions?
James, you got a question?
Does anybody know if there's a side use to the buckwheat stubble?
Here, you can.
No, I think I yelled loud enough. Is there a side use to the buckwheat after you harvest?
Buckwheat pancakes is all I can think of.
No, I mean like the.
Oh, side use to there's not much residue left, if you're thinking of that way, or you're talking about the seed itself.
Any nutrition to the.
Oh, any nutrition to the plant material? Well, I didn't test that, but there's very little. There's very little material left. It really shrinks down and shrivels up. And once I combine it, you spread it, there wasn't anything really left.
Supposedly it helps with potassium in the soil.
Yes, yeah, a buckwheat helps, draw up potassium is what I've been told. So I haven't done a soil test to know that for a fact, no. The buckwheat I rose was on 2 new farms that we picked up in the last year, so I didn't have a lot of fertility history on it to know what it did do.
What's your next challenge?
Figure out how to raise 60 bushel beans and relay wheat rye instead of 40 bushel beans. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I think what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and give it more space, so it may lose a little bit of yield to the rye, but I want to have, with $13 soybeans, it'd be nice to have 60 bushel beans.
John, what about you?
I guess maybe my next challenge maybe wouldn't be in seed production, but I'm currently working with my local NRCS on interseeding projects, and And past year I've grown 60-inch corn, and so maybe trying to improve cover crops and interseeding, and also improve my corn yield along with that with nutrient placement.
Question here.
Question on your rye harvest this year. Was that a specific variety of rye that you were using for the harvest?
It was a certain brand, right? I mean, what did you call that? It was Hazlitt, but it's just open pollinated, so
Right.
not really a variety necessarily.
And what was your germ test on that?
It was 95 this year, wasn't it? Yeah, 95.
With no fungicide?
With no fungicide, correct.
Other questions? So I have one about the hog manure. So how did that work into the system? And then did you have to do anything, was it like low disturbance? So there's no issues?
They just use a
or-
vertical till type,
Talk about the hog manure.
Yep, okay, so, see, it just gives you a great window, right? That's what this is about for me, it's on some acres, because I just got enough to do that I need some place to do some of the stuff in the off-season for, so we are hauling manure to a couple of these farms. I hire that done as well, but it was just a vertical till type machine behind the tanker. It was just tanker and tractor, and then, so we vertical tilled in manure, and then we just field cultivated the field and planted buckwheat. That's what I did behind those acres.